edge of the knife and it hurts just a little. Yeah, and I know, and I know, and I know, and I know that I can't be your friend. It's my head on my heart and I'm caught in the middle. My hands are tied but not tight enough. You're the high that I can't give up. Oh, and here we go. I might hate myself tomorrow, but I'm on my way tonight. At that bottom of the bottom, you're the poison in the wine. And I know I can't change you, and I won't change. I might hate myself tomorrow, but I'm on my way tonight. Let's be low.
right, how about that for a professional fade? What's going on, guys? TJ, can you hear me? All right, let me turn you up a little bit. All right, so we're going to let a few more people kind of trickle in here. I think we're pretty much good to go. I'm still basically the worst ever on Twitch, but if you guys are having any issues with the volume, this is the first time I've tried to have a guest on. We have TJ Hernandez with us today. He's the director of DFS at 4for4 Football. What's with the fancy title this year, TJ?
I don't know, man. My boy Raybon went over to the dark side with you guys, so I figured we'd up the old name tag on the 4for4 title.
Yeah, speaking of the dark side, if you haven't already, be sure and check out Fantasy Labs and the Action Network. Um, we'll talk a little bit about the tools. Obviously, can't show you guys anything behind the paywall, but just pumped to have TJ here with us today. He taught me pretty much everything I know about DFS. I asked him a lot of ridiculous questions for quite some time. He was editing a lot of my really bad articles for a long time as well. So thanks for being here, man. It'll be fun to go through the slate with you. Yeah, so looks like we have a decent amount of people on Twitch and YouTube. If you guys haven't already, do me a favor. Give me a subscription on YouTube. Go ahead and follow me on Twitch. If not, no worries. Just trying to get a little bit more interaction with you guys. Yeah, I figured out we got to keep the intro short because halftime goes by pretty fast. So, TJ, sounds like you've done a lot more research than I have so far this week. So why don't you start us off? What do you think about this Rams game? Is it going to be just out of control ownership? It seems kind of tight at first with not a lot to pay up for outside of Gurley. But what are your kind of initial thoughts on that game?
Yeah, I think Gurley's ownership will be above 30%, at least approaching 30%. I mean, just from the simple fact, Melvin Gordon, Saquon Barkley, James Conner, Julio, AB, Odell, Tyreek, Patrick Mahomes, none of them on the main slate. So even besides the smash spot for the Rams, just a lot of guys that we would think about paying up for aren't even available. Super tight salaries, so you got to get back to the basics in terms of you want to pay up for the floor guys. And even on DraftKings, your salaries are tighter. There are enough plays where you can get to Gurley. On FanDuel, that 5-digit price tag isn't even a concern. Their salaries are still pretty open.
Yeah, normally we have a decent amount to pay up for. Like you said, we're missing a lot of these games that we're normally getting a lot of those plays from. So Todd Gurley at 9,800, very reasonable in this spot with by far the highest implied team total on the entire slate. This game sets up really well from kind of a game environment perspective. It's a really good matchup as far as the stuff at the line of scrimmage, but just pace in general. It's got to be one of the highest pace games in the entire week. We also have that New Orleans and Baltimore game with decent pace as well. So from kind of a broad perspective, is there any of these games that really stand out to you besides the Rams game? I've been kind of racking my brain. I think there's a decent amount of spots that I don't want to go after, so I guess that's good. But yeah, talk a little bit about if there's any other games that kind of from a macro perspective look good to you.
I mean, I think that Cleveland-Tampa Bay game could be pretty interesting just because Tampa Bay is the worst defense in the league. 4for4 has them as the only defense ranked in the bottom 10 in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed to skill positions. So we've seen all those guys, Callaway, Landry, Joku, getting huge target numbers of late, just not doing anything with them. And then on the other side of the ball, Jameis obviously had one of the best games of the year last year, obviously against a much worse defense than the Browns. But just because of the back and forth nature of games, when we see those big passing games, we often see it on the other side. So I think that game's pretty interesting. Probably not too excited about Jameis in particular because a lot of people are going to be on him after his big game, but his pass catchers and Peyton Barber as well, I think is an interesting spot.
Yeah, I really like this game as well. It was on my list of ones to definitely touch on. The Cleveland side of it, Baker just hasn't really had a lot of efficiency with these wide receivers yet, but I mean the volume has been there at least from a target perspective. So I am interested in Jarvis Landry. I am interested in Njoku specifically. I do really like that side of this game. You mentioned Jameis. Yeah, I kind of go back and forth on that. I think his ownership is going to be elevated, like you said. Talk to me about Peyton Barber, because that's one that it's going to take me a ways to kind of get to. I've heard a lot of talk about him so far. Just kind of a price thing, or talk to me about Barber.
If you're playing on DraftKings, you have to find a spot to save some money. And like I said up top, this is a week with tight salaries where we have to get back to basics, and those basics are, if you've played DFS back in the day, if you're playing in Draft Street days, you have to take these spots where you get volume versus price. There's just no two ways about it, because we don't have the luxury this week on DraftKings of having even 2 studs, let alone 3 or 4 on your roster that can bail you out if one of them busts. So you need these high floor plays that come at a discount. Last week, Peyton Barber saw 81% of the Buccaneers' backfield touches, which was a surprise coming off the bye after Rojo was the lead back the week before. But that 81% pushed him up to 67% backfield share on the year for that team, and that ranks 10th in the league among all players. So he's seen a huge chunk of those backfield touches now. Tampa Bay's a home favorite, which we love for running backs, and teams have ran almost 73 plays per game against the Browns, which is the most in the league. So an inflated overall touch floor, just because if you look at those inflated plays with the touch share as a home favorite, he has easily 20 touch upside. I think he saw 19 touches last week. So as bad as the Buccaneers are at running the ball, in weeks like this where salaries are tight, you have to take that discount.
Yeah, I'm going to have to look a little closer at that, but you definitely make kind of a good case for that. And like you said, we're going to need savings, and anytime you can get a running back that's cheap that we know is going to get touches makes a lot of sense. Guys, any questions? Feel free to throw them in the chat. Jessica, thanks for being here. Appreciate it. Sean Pyzak, what's up? We got Penticton in the chat. TJ's been to Penticton. He knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I spent a winter in Kelowna, so shout out to
there you go.
Okanagan.
Yeah, so we got Harbs in the chat. That Freeman TD just tossed me so much money. Yeah, Harbs has got a Q sweat right now, so that'll be interesting. Hope it's going a little better for you in the second half. Hope it's going better for you than my Cardinals, that's for sure. It's not going so well for them.
Thank God for baseball, because this football game is trash.
Yeah, it's really hard to watch. But yeah, I got to watch my Cardinals live last week at the Vikes game. It was equally hard to watch. Just watching them just ram David Johnson into the line 15 times a game is frustrating for sure.
Is that the first Vikings game you've been to since the playoff game?
Yep, it is actually.
Because I think that makes you 2 for 2 in Binky and GPPs while you're at a Vikings game, right?
3 for 3 actually. So I went to
3 for 3. Why aren't you there every week?
I know, right? So I think it was last year, week 1 or 2, they had the Monday night game against the Saints, and I just had all the game stacks. My best week of the year outside of the playoff week was when I was in Viking Stadium. So for whatever reason,
what's it like to run pure?
Man, I don't know. I told you the story about what happened this past week, right? Like, we were going to talk about the slate. Well, me and TJ are just going to talk. You guys can throw in some questions if you want. Yeah, so this week, I'm basically in the stadium on my phone. It's a nightmare trying to get my last-second kind of pivots in. I had a lineup basically that had Jameis naked with a bunch of the Falcons guys on it. And then I did have Uzumwa. And then I was sitting there, and I had another team that had Godwin and Hooper. And as the national anthem's happening, like literally 3 minutes before lock, I was like, this just makes no sense to have no one with Winston. So I pivoted at like 30 seconds probably. Like, everyone's got their hats off, their hands like this, and I'm like this, switching something on my... It was just a disaster, but obviously gets swapped to the nuts, thankfully. Yeah, normally does not happen that way.
So this is the anti-tinker podcast then.
Yeah, I'm all about the tinker. I guess I have to be now after that. But yeah, it's nice to kind of have that happen. Now it kind of takes the pressure off a little bit at least. But yeah, going to games is just a nightmare. But I guess I've had pretty good luck so far. But yeah, so any other questions in the chat? We have some thoughts on Rams wide receivers. Let's talk a little bit more about that game, TJ, just because I think that's where a lot of the decisions are going to be made. We have Cooper Kupp that looks like he's going to be out. Who do you think gets the biggest usage bump, or do we just see a little bit more Gurley and Woods?
I think we'll definitely see some more Gurley near the goal line because he and Cup were actually tied for the team lead in red zone targets. Gurley leads the league in red zone scoring expectation. If we look at where his touches in the red zone are actually taking place, not just at the touches as a whole. But I think a lot of people, by the time we get to Sunday, are going to be on Josh Reynolds because you're getting a cheap play in for an injured starter. But it's not like running back or quarterback where you can just guarantee those snaps. And well, the snaps will probably be there, but you can't guarantee the volume because there's other people to spread it out to. They obviously have Woods, Cooks, and Gurley to throw it to. But the thing I'm concerned the most about is the fact that teams haven't been targeting Richard Sherman at all. He's played surprisingly well this year. A lot of people thought he dropped off. I think we could see we've seen this from teams like the Packers before where they just take a backup, just sacrifice him on one side of the field. I think we could see that from the Rams this week, and I think Josh Reynolds can put up a dud because of that. Woods leads the team in targets and air yards and plays the most snaps between him and Cooks in the slot, and that's where the Niners are weak. The Niners rank 9th in schedule-adjusted fantasy points allowed to opposing receivers, but they rank 8th in fantasy points per target to players line up in the slot. So I really like Woods this week. Actually, if you're worried about playing, say you're building a cash lineup and you're kind of torn between Woods, Gurley, and you want Josh Reynolds as the price saver, but you don't want to play 3, I actually would rather look for another price saver and keep Woods in there.
Kind of like that. I mean, it makes a lot of sense that they would just stick Josh Reynolds over there and then just kind of take away that side of the field. That makes a lot of sense to me, especially if a lot of people are going to go there at 3,500 for savings. Makes some sense to get away. Talk to me a little bit about Tariq Cohen. This is one I probably need to get talked into. It's not typically the type of play that I make, but one thing that I heard someone talk about is thinking about Cohen as a wide receiver. If there's a wide receiver at 5,100, seeing over 60% of these touches in the backfield still, but a lot of usage in the passing game would be interested in, probably would be. So are you on Cohen this week at 5,100?
Yeah, this is like the most obvious cop-out answer ever, but I like Cohen on DraftKings and Howard on FanDuel. I actually think Howard is the play that you want in GPPs because so many people are on Cohen because Howard's lost so many touches to Cohen over the past 2 weeks. 2 weeks ago or 2 games ago, it was really extreme. Last week, Howard still led their backfield in touches. New England has really struggled against running backs in both aspects, on the ground and through the air. But this game has sneaky shootout potential, and the ownership discrepancy, I think, will be pretty big. I think we could probably see Cohen own 2 to 3 times as much in tournaments compared to Howard. So I like taking advantage of that there, but Cohen at 5,100, given his volume in the passing game, I do think he's in cash game consideration on DraftKings.
Yeah, see, it's tough, right? Like, normally I'm just trying to jam in as much volume as I can at running back and go from there. This is a week where you can do it with Zeke, you can do it with Gurley, but, like, it's really tough after that as far as what the value's like. So we had a couple guys in the chat that were throwing out their low-priced wide receivers. Do you have a favorite between Curse, Beasley, Reynolds? If not Reynolds, is there one of these other guys that you're on at the lower side of the salary scale for wide receiver?
Yeah, I mean, Marquise Goodwin is priced okay. I think probably a sneaky play is Willie Snead. He saw 10 targets last week, and he's going to have the most ambiguity between the receivers on the Ravens. I think Crabtree's pretty safe. The one that sacrificed the targets last week was John Brown to Willie Snead. But the Saints have been really bad at covering the deep ball, so we might see a turnaround there. Going back to that Browns game, as bad as we think Antonio Callaway probably is in real life, you have to recognize the volume. And it's just like with Peyton Barber. If you have a player that's getting high volume for his position relative to a salary, Antonio Callaway 4,800 on DraftKings against the worst defense in the league, I don't think you should overthink it too much. I think that's probably my favorite player.
All right, before we get you out of here, TJ, I want to get your thoughts on Christian McCaffrey. A lot of people got burned by him last week. It's been basically McCaffrey or Gordon in that price range. I got kind of lucky, was 100 short from getting to McCaffrey last week, but probably would have played him. So what are your thoughts on McCaffrey this week in a bounce-back spot?
He's in a little bit of awkward salary range, assuming that you're locking in Gurley.
Yeah.
It's pretty hard to get to him, but he's the only running back in the league that's played at least 90% of the snaps. Top 4 in running back share, top 4 in team touch share. The Panthers are never going to be a team that's going to be super exciting in terms of touchdown equity, especially because Cam's going to account for so many of them. But he's such a big part of that offense. And if you're willing to play, if your logic is that Zeke is viable because of his volume, you can't say McCaffrey isn't. I mean, obviously there's price discrepancies there, but just from a workload perspective, they are both huge workload guys in underwhelming offenses. So I'm not going to just say that he had a bad game and I'm not playing him. That's horrible recency bias. He's fine if you could fit him in.
Yep, I'm with you, man. Yeah, thanks for the question, Jessica. Appreciate it. I think we're going to get you guys out of here and back to the Thursday night football game. These are kind of quick shows, but again, thanks, TJ, for being here. If you guys haven't already, I'm sure you are, but follow him on Twitter. He's at TJ Hernandez. Check out all of his work over at 4for4 Football. Love those guys. And yeah, check out Fantasy Labs, the Action Network, per usual. If you haven't already, give me a follow on the channel. And then on YouTube and Twitch, we'll be doing a Sunday morning stream as well at 9 in the morning, followed by Manny and Hodge directly after that. So a full morning of live streams. Yeah, just really want to kind of build this up and get more interaction with you guys. So appreciate everyone that came here and asked some questions. And that's all I got for you guys. All right.
Yeah,
good.
Labs isn't the dark side. I'm just sad because all my friends are there.
Hey, man. Welcome. You can come right here if you want. I'll put in a good word for you. You've done hell of enough for me, that's for sure.
I'll just come drink at the office.
Not a bad play. All right, guys. Good talk. I'll see you out there.